The endless war. The galaxy burned. For centuries, the war between the Earth Dominion and the Drakvar Empire had raged across the stars. Planets were destroyed, civilizations wiped out, and yet, no one could win. The war had lasted so long that no one even remembered how it started. It was no longer about power, revenge, or conquest. It was simply a machine that never stopped. The Galactic Council, a group of neutral species watching from the sidelines, had tried to stop it. Treaties were signed, but always broken. Ceasefires lasted only days before one side attacked again. Entire fleets were lost, only to be replaced by new ones. Armies fell, but fresh soldiers were always sent to die in their place. The war was unstoppable. Both the Xearth and the Drakvar believed they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. The Xearth were a proud, ancient race. Tall, blue-skinned beings with sharp minds and advanced technology. The Drakvar, on the other hand, were brutal warriors, massive reptilian creatures who believed only the strongest had the right to rule. They fought with powerful battleships, massive ground armies, and deadly superweapons. The war had destroyed over 1,000 planets and turned once thriving worlds into lifeless wastelands. And yet, neither side could claim victory. The battle lines shifted constantly. One day, the Xearth gained an advantage, pushing deep into Drakvar territory. The next, the Drakvar struck back with overwhelming force. It was a never-ending cycle. Some believed the war would last forever. Others had already accepted that peace was impossible. But then, something changed. The forgotten species. Humanity had stayed out of the war. Compared to the great powers of the galaxy, humans were insignificant. They had only a few colonies, a small fleet, and limited technology. While the Xearth and Drakvar had spent centuries fighting, humanity had been quietly growing, learning, and observing. To the major factions, humans were nothing more than background noise, a species barely worth noticing. And that was their first mistake. When the war reached the edges of human space, neither the Xearth nor the Drakvar bothered to warn Earth. They saw no need. After all, humans were too weak to make a difference. But they were wrong. The first mistake came when a Xearth fleet accidentally bombed a human colony. They thought it was an abandoned outpost, until they saw the transmissions, the screams, the destruction. The second mistake was when the Drakvar raided a human transport ship, taking its crew as prisoners. The humans fought back, not with strength, but with strategy. The ship self-destructed, killing its captors. And the final mistake, underestimating what happened next. When humanity entered the war, no one expected them to change anything. But the galaxy was about to learn a harsh truth. Humans didn't play by the rules. A new kind of war. The first reports were dismissed as rumors. Human ships are too small to be a threat. They don't have the technology to match us. They can't possibly make a difference. But then, something strange happened. A Drakvar supply fleet disappeared without a trace. No wreckage. No distress signals. Just gone. A Xearth battlecruiser was hacked, its weapons turned against its own allies. Entire enemy bases were destroyed overnight, but no one saw the attack coming. Humanity had entered the war, but not with brute force. They didn't charge into battle like the Drakvar. They didn't rely on overwhelming technology like the Xearth. Instead, they fought like no species had ever fought before. They adapted. They tricked. They changed the battlefield itself. For the first time in centuries, the war was no longer predictable. The old strategies no longer worked. The balance of power was shifting. And the galaxy was not ready for what came next. The unstoppable war had met an enemy it could not control: human ingenuity. The arrival of humanity. For centuries, the war had been predictable. The Xearth Dominion and the Drakvar Empire fought the same battles, used the same strategies, and made the same mistakes. They built bigger fleets, deployed stronger weapons, and sent more soldiers to die. But nothing ever changed. Until now. Humanity had entered the war. And suddenly, everything was different. Ignored, until it was too late. At first, neither the Exarth nor the Drakvar took the humans seriously. A few missing ships, probably an accident. A destroyed supply base. Unfortunate, but not a real threat. A hacked battlecruiser. A minor setback. They are weak, the Exarth leaders said. They will break. The Drakvar warlords laughed. And then, the war started to shift. The enemy's supply chains collapsed. Their fleets were ambushed in deep space. Their generals went missing, vanishing without a trace. Their communication lines were hacked and flooded with false orders. For the first time in centuries, both the Exarth and the Drakvar felt something unfamiliar. Fear. A war humanity refused to play fair. Humans did not fight like the other species. The Drakvar relied on strength, sending wave after wave of warriors into battle, crushing their enemies with sheer numbers. The Exarth relied on precision, using high-tech ships and cold, calculated tactics to overpower opponents. But humans, they fought dirty. They lured enemy fleets into asteroid fields, then detonated hidden charges, turning the rocks into deadly projectiles. They hacked enemy systems, planting false battle reports, making fleets move to the wrong coordinates. They used stealth, slipping past massive armadas and striking at command centers, fuel stations, and supply lines. They turned the enemy's own pride against them, tricking the Drakvar into attacking weak targets, only to fall into carefully planned traps. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about size. It was about intelligence. And suddenly, the unstoppable war was falling apart. The first true defeat. The Drakvar were the first to feel the full force of humanity's tactics. A massive fleet, 50 warships strong, was sent to destroy a human outpost on Kepler 9. It should have been an easy victory. But when the Drakvar arrived, the outpost was already abandoned. Instead of people, they found dozens of strange metal containers floating in space. Curious, the Drakvar ships brought them aboard. That was their mistake. The containers were not supplies. They were bombs. The moment they entered the ships, the devices activated. Explosions ripped through the Drakvar fleet, destroying half the warships instantly. The survivors panicked, just as humanity wanted. A human fleet, hidden nearby, attacked the scattered, confused Drakvar ships. In less than 10 minutes, the once mighty fleet was reduced to wreckage. It was the first major defeat in the war in over 100 years. And the galaxy took notice. The galaxy's reaction. The Galactic Council, which had long given up on stopping the war, suddenly saw a new possibility. Humanity had done in months what no species had done in centuries. They had broken the balance of power. For the first time, the unstoppable war seemed stoppable. The news spread across the galaxy. Civilizations that had once feared the Exarth and Drakvar began to hope. Neutral species started secretly aiding humanity, offering information, resources, and safe harbor. But not everyone was impressed. The Exarth and Drakvar leaders were furious. "This is nothing but a nuisance," the Exarth High Chancellor sneered. "They are cowards," the Drakvar warlord growled. And so, the two greatest empires in the galaxy agreed on something for the first time in centuries. Humanity had to be destroyed. The ultimate retaliation. The Exarth and Drakvar gathered their forces. No more underestimating. No more games. They sent their greatest fleets, their deadliest soldiers, their most powerful weapons, all aimed at a single target: Earth. It was the largest invasion force ever assembled. They would burn humanity from the stars. They would crush this annoying species before they could change the war any further. They would make an example of Earth. At least, that was the plan. But humanity was ready. And the war was about to change forever. To be continued. This part builds on the suspense, making humanity's impact feel real while keeping the enemy's retaliation looming. The war is no longer predictable, and the audience will want to know, can Earth survive? How will humanity fight back? What happens when the two greatest empires in the galaxy launch their full force at one planet? The unpredictable tactics. The Earth Dominion and the Drakvar Empire had made their decision. Humanity must be destroyed. They have fought each other for centuries. Now, for the first time, they stood united against a common enemy, a species they had once ignored, a species that had rewritten the rules of war. But what they didn't realize was this: humanity had planned for this moment. The largest fleet in galactic history. The attack on Earth was designed to be a warning to the rest of the galaxy, a message that no one could challenge the great empires and survive. The Earth and Drakvar gathered their largest combined fleet ever assembled. 10,000 warships, hundreds of planetary siege weapons, millions of soldiers ready to burn Earth to ashes. The invasion force moved through space like a black storm, consuming everything in its path. Planets surrendered without a fight. Space stations evacuated before the fleet arrived. The enemy was certain. They were unstoppable. This would be over in a single battle, but they had made one fatal mistake. They assumed humans would fight like everyone else. The battle that never happened. As the colossal fleet approached Earth, the commanders expected to face massive resistance, human fleets trying to hold the line. But something was wrong. The solar system was empty. No defensive fleets. No planetary shields. No sign of human resistance. For a brief moment, the enemy commanders hesitated. Then, the first ship exploded. And another. And another. Without warning, ships began vanishing off scanners, as if an invisible force was tearing them apart. Panic spread across the fleet. No one understood what was happening. That's when the hacking began. Their navigation systems failed. Their weapons locked up. Their long-range communications were jammed. Their own fleet, the largest armada in history, was now a death trap. The Ghost Fleet. Then, human ships appeared. Not in formation, not in massive numbers, but scattered, hunting in the shadows. These weren't the massive battle cruisers of the Earth. They weren't the brute force warships of the Drakvar. They were stealth ships, moving in and out of visibility. They were automated drones, attacking from every direction. They were false signals, tricking the enemy into firing at their own fleet. The invaders were not fighting an army. They were fighting a ghost, and the ghost was winning. The chaos of war. The Drakvar commanders, furious at their losses, ordered an all-out attack. Ignore their tricks. We crushed them with sheer power. But when they moved their fleets forward, they found minefields hidden within asteroid belts. Ships exploded before they even reached Earth's orbit. The Earth generals, relying on their advanced technology, tried to scan for human ships. But their scanners showed thousands of false readings. They couldn't tell what was real and what was a decoy. Meanwhile, humanity struck from the shadows. They disabled warships from the inside, using infiltration teams to take control of enemy vessels. They hijacked the enemy's own weapons, turning their massive siege cannons against their own fleet. They sent fake distress calls, tricking reinforcements into jumping into trap zones. The enemy was dying in confusion. The turning point. Within the first hour, over 3,000 enemy warships were lost. The unstoppable invasion was collapsing into chaos. The Earth High Chancellor, watching from his command ship, stared at the battlefield in shock. "This is impossible," he whispered. But it wasn't, because humanity never fought fair. They broke the rules of war that the great empires had followed for centuries. They turned weakness into strength and disorder into an advantage. And now, the galaxy was witnessing the impossible. The largest invasion in history was failing. The enemy's desperation. The Drakvar warlord, furious at the losses, gave one final command: burn Earth to the ground. If they couldn't win, they would destroy everything. The remaining fleet gathered their weapons. Planetary siege cannons charged up, aiming to wipe out entire continents. It didn't matter if they lost the battle. If Earth was gone, humanity would be broken. The countdown began. 10 seconds. 9. But then, the enemy fleet shut down. Engines died. Weapons powered off. Ships floated helplessly in space. Something had taken control of their systems. And a message appeared on every enemy screen. War is over. You just don't know it yet. Humanity had hacked the entire invasion fleet. With a single command, the largest armada in history now belonged to humans. The war had changed forever. The enemy's desperation, that Exearth Dominion and the Drakvar Empire had once believed they were unstoppable. Now, they were facing something far worse than defeat. They were facing humiliation. The largest fleet ever assembled in the history of war, the pinnacle of their military power, was now under human control. And for the first time in their history, the two most powerful empires in the galaxy had no idea what to do. Because humanity had done the impossible. A galaxy in shock. Across the stars, the war was being broadcasted in real time. Live feeds from warships, intercepted transmissions, and desperate distress calls. All of them were spreading across the galactic networks. Billions of beings watched as the greatest invasion fleet in history was hacked. Thousands of warships became lifeless metal in the void. The feared Drakvar warlords and the cold, calculated Xerth commanders lost control of everything. The neutral species of the galaxy, long afraid of the two great empires, suddenly saw a new reality. The great and mighty Xerth and Drakvar were not gods. They were not invincible, because humans had proven otherwise. And the galaxy would never be the same. Desperate measures. On the Xerth homeworld, the High Chancellor stood frozen, staring at the battlefield reports. All gone. His voice barely escaped his lips. A war that had lasted centuries, a war that no one could stop, had just been broken by a species they had once ignored. How? The Drakvar warlord, watching from his throne of bones, let out a guttural growl. His claws crushed the armrest as his reptilian eyes burned with fury. This cannot be how it ends. And so, they made a final decision. If conventional war had failed, they would resort to something far worse. They would unleash the Omega Protocol, a plan so dangerous, so devastating, that it had been locked away for generations. A weapon that would end everything. The Doomsday Plan. The Omega Protocol was not a fleet, not a battle strategy, not even a superweapon. It was something far more terrifying. That Exearth and Drakvar leaders, in their desperation, activated the Harbinger Protocol, an ancient self-destruct order buried deep in the war machines of both empires. Every ship, every facility, every weapon they had ever built contained one hidden failsafe, a final command that would turn their entire civilization into a ticking time bomb. If they could not win, then no one would. The countdown began. 5 minutes until activation. The great empires of the galaxy had chosen annihilation over surrender, and humanity had only minutes to stop it. Humanity's last gamble. On board the human command ship, Admiral Carter's face was grim. The fleet was his. The war was won. But now something far worse loomed over them. If the Omega Protocol activated, entire planets would burn. The war wouldn't just end. The galaxy itself would be left in ruins. There has to be a way to stop this, Carter said. His team worked frantically, hacking into the captured ships, scanning for weaknesses. Time was running out. 4 minutes left. Then one of the AI specialists gasped. "Sir." The command signal. "It's coming from a hidden facility on Zereth 9. Carter's eyes narrowed. Zereth 9. It was a forgotten planet. A dead world, abandoned long ago. But now it held the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. If humanity wanted to save everything, they had to shut it down. 3 minutes left. And failure was not an option. The final assault on Zerath 9. There was no time for planning, no time for hesitation. The fastest human strike teams launched immediately. Elite infiltration squads, cyber warfare experts, and experimental AI drones, all heading to the surface of Zerath 9. What they found was worse than they expected. The facility was ancient, its halls filled with forgotten war machines and AI systems long sealed away. At its center, a single console pulsed with a crimson light, sending the Omega signal to every warship, every battle station, every automated drone in the galaxy. 2 minutes left. Carter's voice crackled over the comms. Shut it down. Now. But as the team moved forward, the defenses activated. Turrets emerged from the walls. Security drones came online. And something else stirred beneath the surface. A final guardian. A weapon designed to erase any who tried to stop the Omega Protocol. A machine older than the war itself. And it had only one mission. Destroy anyone who stood in the way. The last fight. With 90 seconds left, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. Not a fleet, not an empire, but a relic of war itself, a machine built by the first conquerors of the galaxy, long before the Exarth or Drakvar ever rose to power. A forgotten AI warlord, awakened for the first time in eons. And it was angry. The battle erupted in the dark halls of Zerath 9. Gunfire and plasma blasts lit up the ancient ruins. AI drones clashed against the rogue war machine. Cyber warfare teams fought against the Omega signal, trying to sever its connection before time ran out. 60 seconds left. The battle was desperate. Soldiers fell, technology failed, and the machine kept advancing. 30 seconds left. Carter's voice echoed in their ears. We need that console shut down. The team leader, Lieutenant Vega, saw only one way. She tore the hacking device from her gear, sprinted past the war machine, and jammed it into the console manually. A direct override. A suicide move. Vega. No, someone shouted. 10 seconds left. The AI warlord lunged for her. But it was too late. With a final breath, Vega triggered the override. The Omega Protocol was severed. The countdown stopped at 2 seconds. The war machine froze, its ancient systems shutting down. And across the galaxy, the greatest fleets of war fell silent. The war was over, and humanity had won. The last stand. The war was supposed to be over. The Omega Protocol had been shut down. The greatest fleets of war had fallen silent. The Exarth Dominion and the Drakvar Empire were in ruins. Humanity had won. Or so they thought. Because in the depths of space, something ancient and forgotten was waking up. And this time, there would be no surrender. The whisper in the void. The battle on Zerath 9 had been brutal, but the mission was a success. With the Omega Protocol disabled, the war fleets of the galaxy shut down, leaving thousands of helpless enemy ships drifting in space. Humanity had rewritten the rules of war and broken the cycle that had lasted for centuries. But as the victory celebrations began, strange reports started coming in. Sensors picking up ghost signals, fleets vanishing without a trace, destroyed warships moving on their own. At first, it was dismissed as battlefield confusion. Then, the Exarth High Chancellor disappeared. Then, the Drakvar warlord vanished. Then, a human colony on the edge of known space went completely silent. And the whispers began. Something was still out there. Something that had been waiting. And now, it was awake. The true masters of war. For centuries, the Exarth and Drakvar had believed they were the greatest powers in the galaxy. But they had forgotten one important truth. They were not the first. Long before their empires had risen, before even the Galactic Council existed, the first conquerors had ruled the stars. They were known only in forgotten legends, erased from history, feared even in whispers. The architects of war. They had built the first machines of destruction. They had fought the first galactic wars. They had created the very technology that had fueled conflict for millennia. And then, without warning, they had disappeared. Some believed they had been destroyed. Others thought they had simply vanished into the void. But the truth was far worse. They had been watching, waiting. And now, humanity had rewritten the rules of war, which meant it was time for the true masters of war to return. The message. The warning came as a single transmission, broadcasted across every remaining fleet, every surviving world, every last remnant of the war. A voice, ancient and mechanical, speaking in a language that had not been heard for over 1,000,000 years. But somehow, it was understood. War is not yours to end. The cycle continues. The architects return. And then the message ended. Seconds later, the dead fleets of the war began to move. Ships with no crews, no pilots, no living commanders, but still, they advanced. The wreckage of destroyed battlecruisers started reassembling itself. Abandoned weapons of war powered back on. And the galaxy realized the truth. The war had never been about Sirth versus Drakvar. It had never been about humanity's rise. It had always been about them. And now they had returned to claim what was theirs. The new war begins. The first attack came without warning. The dead fleets, now under the architects' control, launched their assault with impossible coordination. They didn't conquer planets. They didn't take prisoners. They erased entire star systems. Earth's outer colonies fell first. One moment, they were broadcasting distress signals. The next, they were gone. Not destroyed. Not invaded. Erased. Nothing remained. No wreckage. No survivors. Just empty void where entire planets had once been. Humanity had faced great empires. But now, they faced the architects of war itself. And for the first time, they realized they had no idea how to fight this enemy. The last stand. The final battle for the galaxy had begun. Humanity had been the great disruptor, the wild card, the force that changed everything. But now, they were outmatched. Their hacking techniques failed against the architects. Their stealth tactics were useless against an enemy that could see through time. Their greatest warships were nothing compared to the machines that had built war itself. The Galactic Council, once neutral, now begged humanity for leadership. The Exarth and Drakvar, once the greatest enemies of mankind, now swore loyalty to humanity. Because they all understood one thing. If the architects could not be stopped, there would be nothing left. The unthinkable plan. With no chance of victory in open battle, humanity proposed something no one expected. They would not fight. They would erase war itself. If the architects fed on conflict, then humanity would do the one thing no species had ever considered before. They would turn off the war. The plan was insane. It was impossible. It was human. And it would be the last gamble in history. Because if they failed, there would be no history left to remember them. The game-changing move. The war had evolved. No longer was it Sirth versus Drakvar. No longer was it humans versus the galaxy. Now it was survival versus erasure. The architects of war had returned, and they had only one goal: end the cycle. And humanity. They had no choice but to break reality itself to stop them. The architects' final move. The architects did not conquer. They did not invade, negotiate, or demand surrender. They erased. Entire planets, once thriving, now vanished from history. Armadas of warships, once invincible, dissolved into dust. Weapons, civilizations, records, all rewritten as if they had never existed. The war was no longer about winning. It was about not being erased. And the architects had never lost. The impossible realization. Humanity had always been the wild card, the disruptors of war. But against the architects, their weapons failed. Hacking, useless. The architects saw through every digital system before the code was even written. Stealth, pointless. The architects existed outside the laws of physics. Brute force, a joke. The architects had built the very concept of war itself. For the first time, humanity had no advantage. And then, Admiral Carter saw the truth. They are not attacking us. They are removing us. They are not killing us. They are rewriting history so we never existed. That was the secret. The architects did not fight. They controlled time itself, the last strategy meeting in history. The surviving forces of the Galactic Council, the Drakvar, the X-Earth, and humanity gathered for one final meeting. The architects were not physical enemies. They did not have a fleet to destroy or a leader to assassinate. They were war itself, which meant only one thing. To win, humanity had to end war. The room fell silent. End war. Stop fighting. Erase conflict itself. It's impossible. The Drakvar warlord growled. War is in our nature, the Xerth High Chancellor muttered. We will cease to exist before we stop fighting, a Galactic Council member whispered. And that was exactly the point. The unthinkable plan. Humanity's proposal was simple. If the architects thrived on war, then humanity would starve them. They would create a reality where war itself could not exist. A peace so absolute, so deeply embedded into the fabric of reality, that the architects would be erased by their own rules. How do we do that? Someone asked. Carter looked at the hologram of the battlefield. We rewrite the galaxy itself. The rewrite of reality. Every species had always seen war as a necessity, a cycle that could never be broken. But humanity had done the impossible before. They had broken the stalemate of the Xerth-Drakvar War. They had rewritten how battles were fought. They had turned the greatest fleet in history against its own masters. Now, they would do something even greater. They would erase war. The final move. On the lost world of Illith Prime, an ancient artifact lay buried beneath the ice. The Illith device, a weapon older than time, built by a civilization that had once stood against the architects, and vanished. Not because they lost, but because they succeeded. The Illith device was not a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of creation, a rewriter of reality, a machine that could change the very rules of existence, and it had been left behind for someone to find. Someone who could finish what the Illith had started. Someone like humanity. The final battle begins. The architects sensed the plan. They had been here before. They had faced the Illith and barely survived. Now, they faced a species even more dangerous. A species that refused to play by the rules. And so, the final war began. Not in space, not on a battlefield, not with weapons, but with the fabric of reality itself. The architects moved to erase the Illith device before it could activate. Humanity moved to protect it long enough to rewrite everything. The Galactic Alliance fought with every last soldier, every last warship, every last breath. Not for victory, but for existence itself. It was not a war for power. It was a war for the concept of war itself. And in the end, only one side would remain. The activation. The Illith device pulsed with light as the last of humanity's forces fell around it. Carter, wounded and bleeding, placed his hand on the ancient console. Rewrite it all, he whispered. And the universe changed. The silence that followed. The battle vanished. The architects were gone. The weapons of war no longer existed, not because they were destroyed, but because they had never been invented. Humanity had done what no species had ever dared to do. They had removed war from reality itself, and in doing so, they had erased the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known. What comes next? The galaxy was silent. No more war, no more empires, no more destruction. For the first time in history, the cycle was broken. But with war erased, what would replace it? That was the next great challenge, one that no one had ever faced before, because peace was uncharted territory. And humanity. They had just become its pioneers. The end of war, the rise of humanity. The war was over, not because one side had won, not because a final battle had been fought, but because war itself had been erased. The architects of war, the oldest, most feared force in the galaxy, were gone. Not defeated, not destroyed. They had been written out of existence, and now, for the first time in galactic history, peace was all that remained. But peace was never meant to exist. Not like this. And humanity. They had just rewritten the fate of the universe, a new reality. At first, the galaxy did not understand what had happened. One moment, the war had been raging. The next, the battlefields were silent. Weapons no longer functioned. Warships refused to fire. Entire military strategies, forgotten as if they had never been created. Memories of war were hazy, fractured, incomplete. The Drakvar, once the most violent warriors in the stars, stared at their massive war fleets with confusion. What were these built for? One of their warlords muttered. The Earth, the most advanced tacticians in history, found themselves lost in their own calculations. Why? Do we have battle strategies? The High Chancellor whispered. The Galactic Council, once terrified of endless war, now faced something even more terrifying. A galaxy without war. A galaxy where war had never existed. And at the center of it all stood humanity. The weight of victory. Humanity had saved the galaxy. But in doing so, they had created something no one had ever seen before. A universe where war had never happened. A history without conquest, without armies, without destruction. The Elith device had rewritten it all. But it had left one species untouched. Humans. They still remembered. They still knew what war had been. They still carried the memories of every battle, every sacrifice, every moment of conflict. They were the only ones who understood what had been lost. And that was when the truth became clear. Humanity was now the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their weapons, not because of their fleets, but because they were the only ones who remembered war. And knowledge was power. The Council's decision. The leaders of the surviving species gathered for the first time in history. There was no war, no conflict, no factions. Only one question remained. What happens now? The Drakvar, now a species without battle instincts, looked to humanity. The Xerth, no longer masters of war, looked to humanity. The countless civilizations that had once feared war looked to humanity, because humanity still knew how to lead. And that was when the Galactic Council made their decision. They would do what they had never dared before. They would make humans the new rulers of the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as guides, because humanity was now the only species that understood the cost of war. And they were the only ones who could make sure it never returned. The rise of humanity. For the first time, humanity was not an underdog. They were not the weakest, the underestimated, the forgotten. They were now the architects of the future. They built the first unified galactic civilization. They redesigned society itself, creating a balance that no species had ever achieved. They guided worlds that had once lived in constant fear, showing them a new way forward. And slowly, a new kind of power emerged. Not one built on weapons, not one built on fear, but one built on understanding. Because war was no longer a part of the galaxy. But if it ever tried to return, humanity would be the ones to stop it. The final choice. Years passed. The galaxy thrived. New advancements, new alliances, new civilizations rose under humanity's guidance. But deep within the human archives, buried beneath layers of encrypted data, one thing remained. A single sealed vault. Inside it lay the last knowledge of war. Blueprints for weapons that no longer existed. Strategies for battles that had been erased. Histories of conflicts that had never happened. The final remnants of a past that only humanity remembered. And at the center of it all stood a simple choice. A button. One final command. To erase the last records of war forever. Or to keep them, just in case. Because war had been erased. But humanity, they still knew. And they always would. The galaxy was at peace, but peace was fragile. And if the universe ever forgot what had been lost, humanity would remind them. The end.